You remember that song by Bill Withers, Lean on Me? You know how it goes. Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain. We all have sorrow. But if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Well, anyway, that was a song on the radio today. I got news about my cousin. I was at home by myself, had the radio turned up kind of loud, and I guess I was trying to sing, and the phone rang. Hello, I said, and no one answered. Hello, I said a bit louder, and this voice started screaming, he's dead. They killed Bebe. And the whole world starts spinning, me trying to sit before I fall, this voice echoing through my soul. They killed Bebe, and Bill is on the radio singing, call me when you need a friend. See, Bebe was my cousin, Cedric, about the same age as my youngest brother, Tony, and he was dead. The first of my generation to go out like that. Now, he wasn't the last and he wasn't the youngest. He just got to be the first. Bebe was a father at 16, used to run the streets. Well, we all ran the streets, but you know how to laugh at yourself. And you got to know how to laugh at yourself if you hope to survive those St. Louis streets. So I go home for the funeral. And the boy who killed my cousin is already out of jail. So me and mine start talking like it's time to go play, you know. It's time to go play judge, time to go play jury. It's time to go play executioner. And that's when it hits me. This is what it's all about, letting your emotion drive you to the edge of sanity, holding on so tight and so long to the madness that it eats you from the inside. And it builds and it builds and then blam, you can't help but go off like a gun. And somewhere another child sits staring at the door she don't know will never open. And somewhere another mama sits cradling the phone she knows will never ring. And somewhere a whole community, a whole family is changed again forever. And that is not how I want to make it to the other side. So I start trying real hard not to let other people push my buttons and make me do things. But sometimes I still get so mad I can't see straight. And then that song will pop into the back of my head. And sometimes I pick up the phone and I push the little star button. I say, hello, you know, I'm talking to the other side. I say, I miss you, baby. I say, I miss you, Stevie. God, I miss JoJo. See, Joe was only 14 when they shot him in the head. I say, I miss you, and I will never forget you, and thanks for listening, and I wish I could return the favor. I'll talk to you again real soon. Just keep watching my back. Peace. Now, the whole time, it's a crazy song. See, it never stops playing in the back of my head. I'm right up the road, and I'll share your load. If you just call me. See, I remember that song now because that's Bebe's song. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Hasan Davis, and just like you, I am a hope dealer. I believe that every child in America deserves to be engaged, empowered, and provided a clear path to success in education, career, and community life. But every day in America, you and I know that thousands of young people fall off their trajectory to greatness and fall into systems a lot like ours. And you become the last line, the last possibility of getting them back on track to those dreams. I had the opportunity for 6 years to lead the Kentucky Department of Juvenile Justice. And as the leader of juvenile justice, I took a personal privilege every new Academy of Youth Care Workers to go and visit on the first week and spend a couple of hours explaining to them how important their role, your role is in returning these children to their next greatest possibility. But before I was Commissioner of Juvenile Justice, before I was Vice Chair of the Federal Advisory Committee on Juvenile Justice for the United States and Territories, before I was a graduate of UK Law School, or before I was a graduate of Berea College, I was a lot like the young people you serve. From a broken home where I walked in on my father attacking my mother at 6 years old, and they locked me in the coat room when I was in the kindergarten because I was ADHD and dyslexic. I was broken. To 12 different childhood homes and 5 different elementary schools until I started alternative school. I got my first arrest when I was 11 years old. My mother picked me up from the police station. Instead of having that rage and anger that comes often in those situations, she looked at me that long ride home with tears in her eyes and said, if you could see what I see every time I look at you, you would know how great you were. I didn't know what to do with that, but I knew it had meaning because someone who was important in my life told me that I was great in spite of my current circumstance. I started alternative school in the 8th grade, and Dr. Lorraine Wilson called me into her office, the administrator, and I was expecting the speech you get when you're me, that kid. I know who you are, and I'm waiting for you to mess up so I can get you out of my school, because I'm always like, we could probably get that done by lunch because I know what I have to say. But instead, she sat me down and she looked at me and she said, I think you can accomplish anything you set your mind to, and all you can do, Hasan, is make me a fool for believing such things. And for the first time in my educational career, an adult told me that I was already great and dared me to sacrifice great for something less fulfilling. Now, I'm telling you this because I need you to understand how important it is to have strong adults who believe in the possibility of children before those children even manifest those possibilities. How important it is for someone to see a young person in their current circumstance and imagine them greater. And that's the conversation we have to have today. So I want to tell you a little bit about my brothers, Derek and Sean, who are my very best friends and struggled on the streets with me before I found a way to transform my life. I want you to know them because they are what happens on the other side of the spectrum. When a young person hears all the right things but has so much trauma, drama, and pain that they can't believe for a second that some adult would care enough about them to paint a different picture of their possibilities. My two brothers, Derek and Sean, are serving life sentences now because although they heard the same words that I did, they couldn't quite believe it was possible. And what you need to understand is you don't have to decide whether it's true or not. You just have to believe, and a young person has to decide whether it's true. And that's the great gift of what we do. Why is it important to have relationships with young people? I think that there are two pieces to this. First, there's the value that we provide to young people by building those close relationships, becoming a caring adult, and giving them guidance in their difficult times. There's also data that shows clearly that those of us who work inside of facilities, when we build relationships that are powerful, strong adult-youth relationships, it reduces the possibility of harm and hurt, emotionally and physically, not just to the young people, but to the staff and all the folks that we work with. And so it's important across the board that we make this a part, not an add-on to the work we do, but a core part of the work we do serving young people. I always say that the R plus R equals R, the 3R rule. Everybody in school talks about reading, writing, and arithmetic, but this is respect, relevance, and relationship. Respect plus relevance equals relationship. If we have the ability to respect a young person where they are, not just to deal with their reality, but to understand that they are human beings going through their own transitions and their own difficulties, and to still value them as people. Right? People don't lose humanity because of bad choices. And that's one of the difficult things that we have to deal with in our setting sometimes. We start to label young people as the thing they did, not the person they are. So respect is very important. And you have to give it in order to get it. I have so many staff that say, well, they have to respect my authority. Well, actually, we have to provide them a reason to respect our authority. And once we do that and we have relevance, which means we understand them well enough to actually speak to them about their circumstance, not ours, not our opinion of their circumstance, but who they are and where they are, culturally, socially, emotionally, then we have the ability to really build relationship and to create a possibility where other people think there are no possibilities. So the 3 R's are important. And I always say every child should leave our systems, our care, more whole, not with more holes. Our job is to make them better having touched us, to give them relevance, to create the idea that they are ready to move forward in the world because they came to us, who are youth care workers, right? You're not corrections officers. You're not, the man. You are the next person with the possibility of creating something great with a child who hasn't experienced great very often. Maya Angelou once said, I did then what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better. For me, there's a couple of meanings for that, and that's my own life journey, but also as a youth worker, young person coming up through programs, as an administrator and as a leader of programs and organizations. I understand that the work that we have done traditionally at command and control with young people in confined settings, we thought that was the right thing to do. But now we have all this data, and you've watched the other presenters, and you've heard everybody talk about how important it is for us to have relationship and a different relationship than we have historically with young people, because we want to get a different outcome than historically we have gotten with young people. And so we know better now, and the data and the statistics and all of the research tells us that we have to do this different. So let's talk about, I'm going to move straight to The youth care workers can provide caring relationships, positive and high expectations, and opportunities to participate and contribute. Caring relationships, I think we've covered pretty good. The idea that you have to know someone more than their number, more than their offense, more than their worst day in order to really build a relationship. There has to be compassion. There has to be ability to, you actually have to like young people to do this work. I don't know how many times I've said that and actually warned people they should probably go and do something where they work with machines or cars, because if you don't like children, you cannot do this work well, because there has to be a relationship there. There has to be high expectations. Just because this is the furthest they've ever reached doesn't mean this is where you hold the bar. Hold them up to a great expectation with the promise that you will help them reach that expectation. You will teach them and provide them the training and the support and the nurturing that will allow them at least the possibility, not the guarantee, but the possibility that they might actually reach that height someday. And then we have to talk about opportunities, especially in confined settings. There's so many rules that it's hard to provide opportunities for young people to take leadership roles, for young people to be engaged in decision making, but we individually can make those choices for young people and allow them that space so that then they can grow and practice what we want them to do in the real world and be comfortable in that setting. What does it look like? That's always the question. Social emotional learning is an important part of my own processing in the world. The ability to order my world, to understand myself well enough to value other people. That's a core piece of it. Understand mood management, to motivate myself to have empathy for other people in crisis and pain and make sure that mine isn't the greatest issue in my life. I can recognize difficulty in other people and value it. And to manage relationships. And so those are the core pieces of SEL, and they also, coincidentally, bind very closely to this positive youth development idea that you've heard so much about. Because actually, those two together create the total continuum of support that we can provide a young person for their greatest possibility. And so I want you to understand that this is the piece where you have to go out and seek knowledge. Because you need to know this, and there's great research out there that you can get access to that will help you every day move forward. There's just a model of SEL, and I'm not going to go through that because I've got a couple of things that I really want to talk about. I want to talk about how we do this. These are the pictures of my hope dealers. Alice Lovelace, my mother, who picked me up from the police station at 11 years old, and Dr. Lorraine Wilson, my advocate and champion in alternative school, who challenged me to be as great as she saw me. And the things that they did, the characteristics that they distributed and showed to me were the things that I've built and modeled my own professional career around. So I want to share some of those with you. The 5 rules, I call them, of building positive relationships. Avoid insanity, act with faith and hope, allow time, forgive failure, and deserve victory. Insanity principle is very simple. You keep doing what you've been doing, you keep getting what you've been getting. Makes sense. 2 plus 2 will always be 4. No matter how many times you put in the calculator hoping for a different answer, if you hit the equal sign, it will always be 4. The only difference you get is if you put a different symbol, if you put different equations. But if you keep doing the same thing, we can't continue to wish like we have for a different outcome. And so we have to do something different. And John Maxwell put it well. If you keep doing what you've been doing, you get the same, but your competition gets better results because they actually improve, they actually innovate. And what's our competition? Our competition is gangs. Our competition is high school dropout. Our competition is teen pregnancy. Our competition is drug use. All those things that we're fighting against get better, more traction with young people. We don't innovate and get creative about how we engage the children we serve. And so we have to raise the bar, creating a sense of expectation of their greatness before their actual action toward greatness. Carry faith and hope. Faith and hope, I always say, are verbs, action words. You don't actually have them unless you're doing them. I say faith is the belief that allows us to go into this difficult work, believing in something unseen, the possibility. Hope is the thing that allows us to stay here long enough to actually see it realized. A reliance on future possibility, not what's present right now, but what could be. Because I stayed here, because I spoke light into dark places, what could tomorrow look like? So faith and hope have to go hand in hand, and they are actually action words. So many times I've heard people say things like, I believe you can do better, and then they walk away. But there has to be, I believe you can do better, and here are the 3 things I'm going to do to help you do better. I used to have this pastor who said, I'll pray for you every time we had issues when I was growing up. And I always thought that prayer would be great, but then can you help me? Because you can actually help that prayer come true. And so we have to have action tied to it, or it's just a belief. It's not faith. It's not real courage. These are my faith givers and my hope givers. Faith gives us the courage to imagine what we cannot see or hold. it's that thing that every young person deserves, but it has to be instilled. It has to be something that we are brave enough to keep putting out there, and without a guarantee of a return. And that's the hard part of it, right? We always feel like we're setting kids up to fail if we talk to them about their possibility and there's no real plan for it yet. Everyone deserves someone in their life who can see them as they are afraid to see themselves. For me, that was critical. When I couldn't imagine myself as more than a gangbanger with a life expectancy of 16 years, the big guy in the corner, there were people who still painted a picture of me that was bright enough for me to see in the darkness, and I could start to move toward that picture. We need to be hope dealers, not hope stealers. Agents of reality, truth tellers, dream busters. There are lots of people who like to fancy it up like it's something special and important, but it does not cost us anything to believe and to speak hope to hard times. We don't lose anything. Father Keller once said that a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle, but it does multiply the light, and it divides the darkness immediately. And we have that ability every day. For those of us who choose this work, hope is mandatory, because you can't give what you don't have. You have to believe in the possibility, or you're selling something that, and you know these young people, if you don't believe it, they know you don't believe it, and they won't take it. So we have to allow time. Time for relationships to build, time for young people to change, time for you to gain the skills and the knowledge you need in order to be effective at the work you do. All of this is necessary in order for us to get to the outcome we want. Every child engaged, empowered, and provided a path to their greatest success. And so we have to give yourself time, slow down. This is the computer age with text and all those things, but we still have to wait an appropriate amount of time for transformation to happen. And your speaking into that possibility creates it more likely. I always get this question: when is it finally okay to give up? When you finally say, okay, I've given enough, I've invested enough, I've said enough great, nice words, now can I stop pretending? And I always say that, being a youth care worker is like wrestling an 800-pound alligator. And my advice to you is, if you wrestle an 800-pound alligator, you don't give up when you get tired. You give up when the alligator gets tired. And this alligator doesn't get tired. And so we have to dig deep, find the extra effort, and find the extra energy to keep on speaking the possibility, because we don't know when it's going to happen. It may be like me and happen when they're, in their hardest time, or it might be that it comes later in life when they have some deep reflection, or it might be immediate, but you keep on speaking it, and they have to be responsible for deciding when it's finally relevant. Winston Churchill once said, sometimes it's not enough that we do our best, sometimes we have to do what is required. I think that's just a powerful statement of our mission, our commitment. Forgiveness is important. First, you have to be able to look at a young person who's made mistakes and maybe even very bad choices and see them as a young person absent that decision. Forgive that. I didn't say forgiveness, I said forgiveness. The ability to let that piece go so that you can actually do your work of transforming them so that that does not become the definition of who they are the rest of their lives. And then you have to forgive yourself and all the other systems, because we've all had those moments where we, in our professional lives, didn't do that thing we knew we ought to do. And sometimes that mistake weighs on us so much that we don't put ourselves in a situation to be caught there again. But we have to learn from it, we have to acknowledge it, and we have to let ourselves move forward with it, because the work we do is too important to be held up in our hearts and our heads by that one bad choice. We've got many great things to do. And so we have to forgive. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is right now. We talk very often about what should have happened in the other system, what could have happened the last time they were in a facility, what that teacher should have done, what those people at the child welfare agency should have done when they were 6 years old. But those are all conversations that don't get us to the result we need. Because right now is the only best time you have to not be the next person somebody says should have done something great for that child. So we have to let the past go and move forward with intention. Deserved victory is the last rule. To carry yourself in a way that everyone watching knows that you ought to succeed with every child you serve. With every young person you engage with, there ought to be a connection and possibility. But we know it doesn't always happen. But if you carry the idea, the attitude of Winston Churchill in World War II, where he said, we will deserve victory. We will not lay down like every other nation in Europe to the Nazi power. We will stand and we will fight. Every woman and child will fight, and we will all likely perish. But everyone watching will know we deserve victory. That's the attitude. That everyone watching will know you did everything in your power to change a child's life. And but for some unforeseen circumstance, some outside force, it did not happen. But not because you gave less than you could. So that's the standard. everything at 100. And the child will have to decide if it's enough. You just have to invest what you have. Believe and act as if it were impossible to fail, Charles Kettering once said. So as we move out, I want to have a quick conversation. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, I don't know if I told you I was ADHD, so sometimes I jump around, but it's exciting that people can follow me most often. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe once said that if you treat a man as he is, he will remain as he is. If you treat a man as he can and should be, he will become as he can and should be. I think that, for me, was the most powerful quote that I'd ever found when I finally discovered it, and it spoke so much, not just to my own circumstance and my own experience, but to the work that we do. We don't encounter young people in their darkest moments and hold them there as the image of what they can be. When we do our best work, we see them as a possibility, the whole human with a great potential. And because we can see them like that, they might have the courage, as I finally one day did, to see themselves like that. I'm going to close with a picture of my brothers. People ask me all the time, what was it that made me go from Hasan Davis, juvenile delinquent, banging on the streets of Atlanta, Georgia, with a life expectancy of 15 years, to Hasan Davis, Juris Doctor, Commissioner of Juvenile Justice, testifying before Congress on reauthorization of great stuff. And I didn't know exactly what to say the first time I heard it, until I heard a young man ask me once, Mr. Davis, I was speaking, he was a young man who walked with a limp because he had been shot and he'd had some experiences in his own life like mine. He said, do you remember your birthday? And I was like, well, I was born in December. He said, no, sir. I asked if you remember your birthday. And I was puzzled. And he said, the day you realized your life had value, was important, was meaningful. And I thought about that. And I remember when I was making that transition, and I was trying to be something totally different than anybody expected, but still going back home and running with my brothers on the streets of Atlanta. And I found myself in a terrible situation. I won't get into detail, but the end of the story is I was sitting between my brother who had a machine gun and the guy who was reaching for a shotgun, and I was the only one that recognized that this was probably not the best place to be. And as I was about to give up all of the aspirations that everyone had painted for me and accept my reality, because my brother used to tell me, people like us don't get to change. But there were enough people who painted broad pictures of another me, that in the middle of that chaos with a machine gun pointing to a kid's chest, in the back of my head, all I could hear was my mother's voice saying, if you could see what I see, every time I look at you, you would know how great you were. And Dr. Lorraine Wilson's voice saying, Hasan, I believe you can do anything you set your mind to, and all you can do is make me a fool for believing such a thing. See, that day I only had two voices to paint a picture counter to my reality. But that day I had two voices, two champions, two adults who built strong relationships with me, bonded to me, not to my circumstance, not to my issues, not to my disability, to me. Brave enough to speak light into my darkest places, hoping that when the time came for me to cash that, I'd be brave enough to recognize it for what it was. And in that moment, I was. And I managed to get us clear of that situation that I knew was going to cost someone's life and someone's liberty. And that was the day I recognized the value that had been placed on me by someone who didn't have to, but chose to make my life and my success their mission, their passion. Someone just like you, who made a commitment to make a child's life better having touched them, not worse. We are youth care workers. We provide opportunity and create possibility where other people have given up hope of either. And this is the most important work we will ever do for a child, for a family, for a community, for a nation that deserves every hand on deck in order to make sure that we have the future for ourselves and our children that we deserve. So thank you for your incredible work, and God bless.